You really think he can hear you? Elena's voice trembled as she stood beside the hospital bed. Graham didn't answer at first. He just looked at his father's still face, then whispered, I don't know, but I need him to hear me, just once. He sang one broken song, for the father he thought he'd already lost, then turned to leave, never knowing. The old man opened his eyes behind him. This wasn't just music. It was a last chance, a whisper across silence, and the moment that would change all three of their lives forever. Don't scroll. What happens next will stay in your heart long after the final note. Elena Morris hadn't planned on ending up here, working the graveyard shift at a care facility, her dreams packed away like sheet music in a forgotten case. Just 2 years ago, her voice had drifted through smoke-filled jazz lounges, soft and slow, like honey melting into midnight. The spotlight never made her famous, but it gave her purpose, and for a while that was enough. But love, no, illusion, had rewritten her song. His name was Marcus, older, confident. He called himself a manager, promised studio time, contracts, just one more audition. He swept her off her feet and slowly picked her pockets clean, until one day he was gone. No warning, no forwarding number, just an empty apartment and a drained savings account. Her guitar vanished with him. With nowhere to go and bills that didn't care about heartbreak, Elena said goodbye to the music world. A neighbor referred her to a staffing agency, and before she could blink, she was handed a pair of scrubs and a list of night shift duties. The job was supposed to be temporary, just a bridge. But months passed, and her voice remained silent, until room 211. Thomas Cole had been unresponsive for nearly a year. Once a renowned violinist, his name still lingered in concert halls and on old vinyl sleeves. But now he was just Mr. Cole, a chart clipped to the end of his bed, machines humming steadily by his side. Most staff didn't expect anything from him. He's not really here anymore, they would say. But Elena wasn't like most staff. There was something about Mr. Cole, the tilt of his head, the almost stern set of his jaw, like a man still listening to a song only he could hear. She couldn't explain it, but every time she entered his room, a strange pull settled in her chest. Familiar, grief-laced. Maybe it was because her father had died in a room like this. Maybe it was guilt, or the ghost of a life she no longer lived. But one stormy night, as thunder cracked like applause in the distance and rain streaked the windows like tear tracks, Elena paused beside his bed and gently took his hand. You probably can't hear me, she whispered, her voice uncertain. But I used to sing once. My dad said it helped people feel less alone. She sat down in the chair near his bedside, her scrubs damp from a leaky hallway pipe, her heart heavier than she could carry. She hadn't sung in over a year. Not really, not with feeling. But tonight something in her ached to fill the silence. And so she did. Smile, though your heart is aching. Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but warm. The melody curled around the cold air like breath on glass. Smile, even though it's breaking. Her voice grew steadier with each note, as if rediscovering something long buried beneath pain and dust. The fluorescent light buzzed above her, but inside the room everything else was still. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that someone was listening. Graham Cole, Thomas's son, stood frozen just beyond the doorway, caught in place by the sound of that voice. He had come only to drop off paperwork, maybe glance in for 5 seconds. He never stayed. He never dared. But that voice, it stopped him. Not loud, not polished, but honest. Ache poured into every syllable. Graham edged closer to the door, peering through the sliver where it hadn't quite latched. There she was, blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, lips curved gently around each word, holding his father's hand as if it still mattered. He couldn't look away. He hadn't stepped into that room in nearly a year, hadn't even tried. And yet now, with no invitation, with no plan, he found himself standing at the edge of a song that would change everything. And Elena? She just kept singing, for a man she thought was too far gone to hear, unaware that she had already stirred the silence and awakened someone else entirely. Graham Cole was the kind of man who carried silence like armor. At 33, he was a rising star in the tech industry, the CEO of a high-growth analytics firm with offices spanning 5 cities and investors who whispered his name like a promise. He wore tailored suits, answered only when necessary, and lived in a penthouse filled with glass, steel, and not a single photograph. He had everything, except warmth. Graham had learned early that affection was a luxury, not a given. His mother, Celia, had been the soft light in an otherwise quiet house. She hummed lullabies while cooking, read poetry at night, and kissed him on the forehead every morning, even when he began pulling away in teenage embarrassment. Her voice had a music of its own. It carried him through the cold. But she died when he was 12, a sudden stroke, gone in a breath. His father, Thomas Cole, had been on a European concert tour, Budapest one night, Vienna the next. The great violinist, acclaimed, unreachable. He returned 2 days after the funeral, dressed in black but saying very little. No tears, no apologies, just silence. That was when something inside Graham shut off. They lived in the same house but spoke like strangers. The rooms echoed with absence, and where once his mother's songs lived, now there was only the ticking of clocks and the scratch of a bow against strings. By the time Graham left for college, he barely looked back. Their relationship had become a ghost, familiar, haunting, but never fully there. Years later, when Thomas suffered a massive stroke and slipped into a near-vegetative state, Graham did what was expected. He arranged the private facility, signed the papers, covered the bills. He made sure his father had the best, but never walked into room 211. What was the point? There was nothing left to say until that night. He hadn't meant to be there long, just dropping off legal paperwork after a dinner meeting. The halls were half lit, quiet. A storm rumbled beyond the windows. He was halfway past room 211 when he heard it. A voice, soft, raw, female, singing. He stopped, took a breath. Smile, though your heart is aching. It hit him like a memory falling from the ceiling. The words, the tone, the melody, so familiar it burned. His mother used to sing that song to him on nights he couldn't sleep, sometimes while brushing his hair, sometimes while the two of them waited for his father to call. He turned slowly, drawn to the sound like a thread pulling him home. Through the cracked door he saw her, a young woman with a ponytail and tired eyes, sitting beside his father, singing like the world had forgotten she existed. And yet, it was the most alive thing Graham had heard in years. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply sang, as though the act itself was an offering, to a man who hadn't spoken in months, to a room that had long gone quiet, to herself. Graham froze in place. He hadn't stepped foot into that room since the stroke, hadn't looked his father in the face in over a year. But now here was a stranger doing the one thing he had never dared, singing into the silence. Something cracked in him, not loudly, not suddenly, but like ice thawing under a spring sun, quiet, inevitable. He found himself listening to the entire song, standing still as stone. His breath caught on the final note, and when her voice faded, he didn't move. Even after she left the room and walked down the corridor, unaware of him, he remained there, back against the wall, eyes stinging. He didn't understand it, not fully, but he couldn't deny what he felt. Not grief, not guilt, not yet. But something close, something aching, something that sounded a lot like hope. Elena wasn't used to seeing anyone in the corridor after 9 p.m., especially not someone in a suit. She had just tucked in Mr. Cole for the night, the final note of smile still lingering in her throat, when she turned and nearly collided with him. Graham stood mid-step, eyes wide, clearly caught off guard. "Oh," Elena gasped, clutching the chart in her hands. I'm sorry. Was I too loud?" Graham shook his head slowly. "No, you weren't." There was a beat of silence between them. Elena shifted on her feet, unsure what to say. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not in the dim halls of a care facility. But his eyes were softer than she expected. Curious, searching. "You were singing to my father," he said finally, voice quiet. Elena blinked. "I didn't realize anyone was listening." "I was. For several nights now, actually." He offered a faint, awkward smile. "I guess I've been lurking outside the door like some ghost." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. You're Mr. Cole's son? Graham, he said, extending a hand. And you're the one with the voice that stopped me in my tracks. She flushed. I used to sing, she admitted. A long time ago. Not here. I know, he said. That surprised her. You know? You don't sing like someone who forgot how, he replied. You sing like someone who lost something and is finding pieces of it again. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Then Graham said something that caught her completely off guard. Would you teach me? Her brows lifted. Teach you what? To sing, he said, almost sheepish now. Just one song. Smile. I want to sing it for my dad. Just once. Elena hesitated. You want me to teach you to sing a jazz ballad? Here? I know it's crazy, he said, but when you sing, it's like something comes back into the room. Maybe, if he hears it from me, maybe it'll matter. Maybe it'll wake something. There was no bravado in his tone, no polished charm, just vulnerability, honest and unfamiliar on a man who clearly wasn't used to asking for help. Elena looked at him, then at the quiet hallway behind them. All right, she said softly, but I'm warning you, I'm tough. I think I can handle that. What? They began meeting twice a week after her shifts, tucked away in the staff break room where the vending machines hummed and the old upright piano sat half forgotten in the corner. Their first lesson was full of awkward laughter. Graham was all nerves and no rhythm. He kept missing notes, stumbling over lyrics. But Elena never flinched. She corrected him gently, tapping his shoulder when he tensed, coaxing each syllable with quiet patience. You're singing from your throat, she told him. Try from your chest, where it hurts. By the third lesson, they had moved on to Moon River. Then came Unforgettable, and somewhere between the harmony and the missed notes, they began to talk. Not about work, not about music, but about the things that had broken them. Graham told her about growing up in a house full of sound, but no warmth, about a father who could bring concert halls to tears, but never once said, I'm proud of you, about a mother who died too young and a boy who learned to survive by shutting down. Elena shared pieces of her own story, about Marcus, the betrayal, the loneliness, about how she used to sing not for applause, but because it made her feel less alone, and how one day her voice just stopped. They didn't always respond to each other's stories. Sometimes they just sat in silence, eyes on the lyric sheets, letting the weight of their confessions hang in the air. But every note they sang together stitched something invisible between them, a thread of trust, of understanding, of healing. They didn't know it yet, but they were slowly writing a new song, together. The hallway was empty when Graham arrived. No boardroom lights, no audience, just the rhythmic beep of monitors and the soft whisper of oxygen. Room 211 felt colder than usual, as if the air itself held its breath. He stood at the doorway for a long time before stepping in. Thomas Cole lay motionless, just as he had for months, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. Machines hummed quietly around him, indifferent to the son standing at his bedside for the first time in a year. Graham pulled a folded lyric sheet from his coat pocket, the same one Elena had scribbled notes on during their lessons, her handwriting curling in the margins. Breathe here, soften this line, mean it. He sat in the chair beside the bed. His heart pounded so loudly he wondered if the machines could pick it up. I don't know if you can hear me, he said quietly, but I'm going to sing, for you. He cleared his throat and began. Smile, though your heart is aching. His voice cracked on the second line. He paused, took a breath. Smile even though it's breaking. He sang slowly, carefully, each word trembling with the weight of everything left unsaid. It wasn't polished. It wasn't even on key, but it was real. When he reached the final lyric, you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. He could barely get the word out. His throat tightened, his eyes burning. He looked down at his father. Nothing. Not a flicker, not a twitch. Just stillness. Graham reached for his hand, frail, cool, and held it gently. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry it took me this long. I wasted too much time being angry. Too much time not showing up. He sat there for a minute longer, then slowly stood. His shoulders felt heavier than ever as he left the room. He didn't know it yet, but moments after he disappeared down the hallway, Thomas Cole's fingers twitched. The next morning, Graham boarded a plane to Switzerland. It was a dream offer, a long-term executive position overseeing a global merger, an opportunity most CEOs would fight for. Elena met him for coffee before his flight. She smiled, proud but subdued, as he explained the details. The contract, the move, the years it might take. "You should go," she said, trying to sound steady. "This is everything you've worked for." He studied her for a moment, as if searching for something in her eyes. "I haven't said yes yet," he offered. "You don't have to say anything," she replied softly. "I already know." She gave him a small smile as he walked away, one that lingered in his chest long after he disappeared through the airport gate. The sun rose quietly over the city, casting a soft golden hue through the windows of the care facility. It was just another morning for most of the staff, checking vitals, logging charts, changing linens. But not in room 211. When the night nurse entered to perform the routine morning check, she nearly dropped her clipboard. Thomas Cole's eyes were open, not flickering, not confused. Wide, clear, focused. She froze in place, heart thudding. "Mr. Cole?" she whispered. He blinked slowly and turned his head, just slightly toward her, and then with a voice dry from disuse but unmistakably alive, he spoke a single word. "Graham." 30 minutes later, Elena burst through the hallway, still in scrubs, tears already welling in her eyes. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She rushed into room 211 and fell to her knees beside the bed. Thomas turned his head again, slower this time, and when he saw her, the corners of his mouth pulled upward, weakly but unmistakably, a smile. "You're back," she breathed, clutching his hand. "You're really back." He didn't say much. Couldn't yet, but his eyes were speaking, full of light, recognition, and something deeper, gratitude. After a few minutes, Elena stepped into the hallway and called the only number she knew mattered now. Graham answered on the second ring. "Elena," his voice was groggy, confused. "I just landed in Zurich." She was breathless. "Graham, your father. He said your name. He's awake." There was silence, then, "What?" He opened his eyes. "He asked for you, I swear." She heard his breath catch. "I'm coming home." By nightfall, Graham was back. He canceled his meetings, left the contract unsigned, told the board there was a family emergency, and walked away from a multi-million-dollar deal without blinking. Elena met him in the lobby, her heart pounding at the sight of him. "I didn't know if you'd make it in time," she whispered. "I wasn't going to miss this," he replied. They walked together in silence down the corridor, stopping outside room 211. Graham stepped in, slowly. His father was propped up on pillows now, pale but alert. When their eyes met, everything around them went quiet. There were no rehearsed speeches, no dramatic music, just the unspoken weight of years and the miracle of a second chance. Thomas lifted one trembling hand. Graham crossed the room in 3 strides and grasped it. "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here, Dad." Thomas blinked slowly, his gaze drifting to the woman standing quietly in the corner. Then he looked back at his son and rasped, "She sang." Graham nodded. "She did." Thomas turned to Elena again, and in a voice barely louder than breath said, "Thank you for the song." And that was when Elena finally cried. For real. Not out of grief, not out of regret, but out of awe. Because somehow a single melody had brought a man back to life and healed 2 broken hearts in the process. 1 year later, the halls of the care facility didn't feel the same. Gone was the heavy quiet that once wrapped around room 211 like a shroud. In its place came the gentle sound of strings, the hum of humming, the kind of music that made nurses pause mid-shift just to listen. Thomas Cole was playing the violin again. His hands were slower now, fingers occasionally stiff with age and recovery, but the soul in the music had never left him. Each note he played carried the weight of survival, of memory, of love long unspoken and finally reclaimed. In the courtyard behind the facility, under the soft shade of a blooming dogwood tree, Thomas sat with the violin tucked beneath his chin. Sheet music fluttered gently on a stand in front of him. Across from him, Graham tuned a weathered acoustic guitar, brow furrowed in concentration. And beside them stood Elena, no longer in scrubs, no longer hiding her voice. She sang again, not in nightclubs or smoky lounges, but in sunlit rooms, at therapy centers, and in gardens like this one. Her voice had grown fuller, wiser. It wasn't about applause anymore. It was about healing, offering comfort, holding space for others, just as she had done that night in room 211. She called it heart work. Together, the three of them had found a rhythm, a quiet harmony of presence and purpose. Graham had stepped back from the corporate whirlwind. He now worked remotely, consulting on projects that allowed him to stay grounded, close to home, close to them. He traded late-night board meetings for early morning walks with Elena, for cooking lessons with Thomas, for something real. And when Elena suggested they host a small concert for the residents and staff, the people who had watched their story unfold in fragments and whispers, neither Graham nor Thomas hesitated. It was a simple setup, no stage, no spotlight. Just chairs pulled into a circle, paper flowers strung from the walls, and a banner drawn by a nurse's daughter that read, "An afternoon of music and miracles." Thomas began with a soft solo, his bow gliding over strings like a whisper from another time. Graham joined in next, his guitar grounding the melody with a steady pulse. Then Elena stepped forward. She closed her eyes and sang "Smile" again. Only this time, she wasn't trying to reach someone lost. This time she was singing for everyone who had been found. And in that moment, surrounded by a circle of quiet smiles, soft claps, and glistening eyes, three lives once broken played in perfect harmony. As the final note of "Smile" faded into silence, Elena stood with her hands softly clasped, breath still catching from the emotion of the song. The room, filled with residents, nurses, and staff, had fallen still. It wasn't just a performance. It was something deeper, something sacred, a quiet healing that had passed from voice to heart. Then came the applause, slow, warm, growing louder with each second. A few patients wiped at their cheeks. A nurse murmured, "That girl was born for this," but Elena barely heard them, because Graham was looking at her. He stepped away from the guitar. His eyes didn't waver as he reached into his pocket and slowly sank to one knee. The room gasped. Elena froze. Graham opened a small velvet box. Inside, a simple gold ring, glinting with a single sapphire. "Elena," he said, voice unsteady, "you didn't just bring my father back. You brought me back too." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought I'd locked my heart away years ago. But you," he smiled through the emotion, "you sang to it, and it answered." He took a breath. "I don't need stages or plans. I just need you. Will you marry me?" Elena's hand flew to her mouth. She laughed, a soft, choked, joyful sound, and nodded through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Graham slid the ring onto her finger and stood. The moment they embraced, the room exploded into cheers, clapping, whistling, even a few standing ovations from people who hadn't stood in months. But then, something even more breathtaking happened. From the back of the room, Thomas Cole slowly pushed himself up from his chair. With effort but determination, he walked toward them, step by step, until he stood beside his son and future daughter-in-law. Then, with hands that once played the world's grandest concert halls, he reached out and gently took both of theirs. The applause softened. The tears kept falling. Because in that moment, no words were needed. Three lives, once fractured, had been joined together again. By song, by love, by something stronger than silence. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with quiet harmony, like a song you didn't realize you needed until the final note fades. Graham, Elena, and Thomas found something that so many of us still long for: reconnection, healing, and the courage to show up for one another, even after years of silence. In a world that often moves too fast, where love is mistaken for grand gestures and family gets lost in forgotten calls, this story reminds us that sometimes All it takes is a voice, one song, one moment of stillness. Today, in modern American life, we often forget to pause, to listen, to forgive. But what if you made that call today? What if you reached out before it's too late? Whether you're a parent waiting to hear from your child or a grown son afraid to say, I miss you, let this be a reminder. It's never too late to return to someone you love. We'd love to hear from you. Has music ever helped you reconnect with someone? What song reminds you of someone you miss? Tell us in the comments. Your story may inspire someone else. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. At Warm Soul Stories, we share real tales of second chances, unexpected love, and the healing power of human connection. Because in the end, home isn't a place. It's a feeling, a voice that calls you back when you've forgotten the words to your own song. Thank you for being with us today.